All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Luke Martin with Delta College Digital Media here on KWDC 93.5 LPFM Stockton in association with LM6 Productions. Today, I have a special guest here with me in the studio, our newly remodeled podcast studio, as you can see here. Joining me today in the studio is the voice of the Stockton Heat, Mark Binetti. How are you today, Mark?
Doing great. Thanks so much. And by the way, it still has that new podcast studio smell, so it's great digs you got over here.
Oh, thank you. We're happy to have this here. So through an internship I've had with the Stockton Heat, I've been able to meet Mark and appreciate some of the work he does as a broadcaster. And, as a broadcasting and digital media student, I can appreciate that. Digital media student here at Delta, audio is a big part of what we learned. Today, I hope that this interview will share with the D Media students, listeners of KWDC, and others who are able to tune in so that they can hear Mark's story as a professional broadcaster. So thanks again for being with us here today, Mark.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
So before we jump into the interview, could you just introduce yourself, your name, where you're from, and what your job is?
So I am Mark Binetti. I'm the Director of Community Relations and the voice of the Stockton Heat, AHL affiliate of the National Hockey League's Calgary Flames. I am originally from New York. I lived there for 14 years, the first 14 years of my life, and then moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I consider home. My parents are there. My younger brother's still there. And from there, I just kind of bounced around with wherever I went to college, did my jobs, and ended up here in early August.
Awesome. And so before we get into the meat and potatoes of the interview, I just wanted to ask, as someone who works in sports and broadcast, what's your favorite sports team, and what's a player you like to follow?
So I've got a lot of favorite teams in all the respective sports. I'd have to say my all-time favorite sports team is the New York Rangers in the NHL. I was 6 years old when they broke a 54-year curse and won the Stanley Cup, so that was kind of indelible. And from there, followed all the Ranger greats, in particular Brian Leetch and Mark Messier were my two guys, and then Mike Richter, Adam Graves, that whole 94 Cup team, let's just be honest with ourselves. But Brian Leetch and Mark Messier were the two that really stood out. Baseball, diehard New York Yankees fan, Derek Jeter was my guy growing up. And I just those are my two favorite sports, I'd have to say. I love them all equally, but my two favorites, I'd have to say, are baseball and hockey foremost than anything else. Basketball, grew up watching the Knicks. And Allen Houston was my guy until I moved to Charlotte and the Hornets left. And then I was, I guess, graced, if you can call it, with the Bobcats. Not such a great run for them, but, it was what it was. The Hornets came back since, which was nice. And then in football, I started off watching the New York Giants and Tiki Barber. And since we moved to Charlotte, we became Carolina Panthers season ticket holders. So watching Steve Smith, Luke Kuechly, Christian McCaffrey, Jake Delhomme, and all those guys throughout the years has been pretty special.
Oh, awesome. Glad to hear you like the Rangers. I'd say those are also one of my favorite teams. I got into the New York Rangers. Henrik Lundqvist was one of my favorite goalies watching. So, as I was getting into hockey, he was one of the first goalies I watched. So, New York Rangers have always been one of my favorites. So, glad to hear that. First of all, I wanted to ask you, what made you get into this specific career path? Like, what got you into broadcasting?
So it's interesting because, to quote Robert Frost, I took the road less traveled or the road less taken. And I've always loved sports. I've always had a passion for sports, but that's not where my original career aspirations were. I have a biology degree, actually, from the University of South Carolina.
Oh, really?
And turned that into calling hockey games somehow. So it's interesting. But ultimately, it was my love for sports that allowed me to pursue it and wanted me to give this thing a shot. And, I caught lightning in a bottle in certain areas. And before you know it, ended up out here after now completing my 9th year professional calling hockey games. So it's been a heck of a journey.
So to jump into on that then, was there a specific broadcaster, or was there something that made you say oh, this is the job that I want to do? So what was that for you?
Well, as a kid, we had mentioned the New York Rangers. I'd grown up watching Sam Rosen call the Rangers games on television on MSG Network, and Sam is New York Rangers hockey. He's had that job for over 35 years, and was actually the last local television team. He and John Davidson, who's currently with the Columbus Blue Jackets again as a president of hockey operations, they were the last local broadcast team for an NHL team to call the Stanley Cup Cup final. Ever since that moment, it became a national televised thing, and that's where guys like Gary Thorne on ABC and Doc Emmerich on NBC, before his retirement, took over that role as the voice of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And so he obviously had a big hand in that. John Sterling, the voice of the New York Yankees, growing up listening to him, along with Michael Kay, who's now on the television side, they got me loving that. And then, of course, Doc Emmerich himself. He's just the greatest of all time in anything, really. So it was those guys in particular that gave me an appreciation for the guys that called the game, regardless of what sport it was. And it was just, I thought it was fascinating that a guy could literally sit on a camera and talk about what was going on. And that always perplexed me as a kid. And I've had an interest in it, but it wasn't serious enough in college to be like, I should probably do this. There were a couple of moments where you thought about that, but outside of that, I mean, the $1 million question for something like you're just asking is, how do you get into that? Where do you start? And everybody has a different path, including myself. I mean, I was, dropping chemicals in an Erlenmeyer flask my senior year, and now I'm putting on a headset for a 9th straight season. So it's definitely something.
So how did you make that jump then from, biology and chemicals to broadcasting? How'd you make that jump then?
So it's interesting because halfway through my college career at South Carolina, the real USC, by the way, I don't care what anybody says, and I have proof to back that up. Darius Rucker, who hopefully will win a Nobel Peace Prize, frontman of Hootie and the Blowfish, they're all South Carolina alumni. And he said, if somebody tells you USC's in Los Angeles, you tell them we were a school before California was a state. I just want to get that off the record right now. But when I was halfway through my college career at South Carolina, I kind of thought about it. It was somewhere in the back of my head, maybe this could be something that I could do, but wasn't too sure. I talked with my advisor, and they said you'd restart college right there. Okay, so that kind of put that in the rearview mirror. I'm about to graduate, and the thought comes back in my head again. And I talked with the voice of the Charlotte Checkers at the time back home, Jason Shia, a dear friend of mine, a dear mentor of mine. At the time, the Checkers were in the ECHL, where I had just come from before joining the Stockton Heat. And they were going to move up to the American Hockey League the next year and be the affiliate of the Carolina Hurricanes, 3.5 hours up the road from Raleigh, where they play. And, he was honest with me on certain things, and I just kind of put it in the back of my head. I get out of college. We're in the middle of the job recession. Nobody's hiring anywhere. I'm trying to possibly get into med school or grad school. Nothing was available. And my brother actually had a whole bunch of friends in a poker league that he played in. One of them was a production assistant for ESPNU, the all-college sports station for ESPN. That station 10 minutes down the road from my house in Charlotte. And so they needed weekend warriors to basically watch games, help create highlight packages to then go on SportsCenter U and all these different other programs and whatnot. And it seemed interesting. It seemed like a lot of fun. They brought me in. I brought a statistical flair to that, and they said, okay, you know the highlights, you know the games, you know the numbers. Why don't you help us out with National Signing Day for college football? So I joined the production team for that and put together production binders for the talent that listed out 2-deep depth charts, who was coming back, who was going to the draft, who transferred, upcoming schedule for the next year, ranking recruiting classes, where guys on the ESPN 300 signed, and all these recruiting lists, and it was a blast. And at that moment, on top of getting an internship with Jason with the Charlotte Checkers, picking him up on his offer, hey, if you want to give this a shot, let me know and we'll do it. It really opened my eyes to what I really wanted to do. And from there, it was just a matter of busting my tail and getting into a position where this could be a reality for me.
So you mentioned at the ESPNU, you did a lot of statistical and gathering packages. So when did you first make your voice debut as far as broadcasting goes? It
was on an internship with the Charlotte Checkers. It was actually the Saturday after Thanksgiving of 2011. We were playing against the Milwaukee Admirals. We had a Friday-Saturday series, and Jason came up to me on Friday, and he said, oh, by the way, be ready, you're on my intermissions tomorrow. Just threw it right at me.
Really?
He had put the bug in my ear at the start of the season. He said, hey, we'll get you used to the broadcast structure, how I do things, how the booth is professionally run, and then when I feel you're comfortable enough and you got a grasp on that, you're going to do the intermissions. And then when we have televised games on Time Warner Cable, now Spectrum, down in North Carolina, then you're going to do all of my pregame and postgame shows while I'm on the television side. And yeah, it was just that Friday. My grandparents were in town, actually, from New Jersey, and they were listening to all these intermissions, waiting for my turn. And then I came back after the Friday game, and I said, so I'm going to be on radio for the first time ever tomorrow. And it was great. Jason welcomed me in, kind of held my hand in a sense of, all right, this is Mark. He's going to be a familiar voice here. Let's go down the line. Tell us what's going on in the NHL tonight. And then I went down scores, and that was that.
So, jumping on your first broadcast like that, how does one find their voice to be able to do that? So how do you find your voice to be able to, jump live on broadcasts like that?
I think finding your voice is recognizing your situation. So for me, it was doing intermissions. And so what did that entail? It was scores. It was knowing who was standing out in these games that you're recapping and all that. So after I did my first couple, I realized I can't just say Calgary leads Arizona 3-1. The New York Rangers beat the New York Islanders 2-1 in a shootout. Have something more to contribute to the conversation. So it was Calgary leads 3-1. Mika Kiprasov carried a 46-save shutout into the third period, but ultimately Arizona solved him, but the Flames get 2 points. Now to Madison Square Garden, where the Rangers beat the Islanders 3-2 in a shootout. It went 9 rounds, and Chris Kreider had the game winner, and just kind of go down the line like that. So instead of just showing up, actually have something of substance to give the situation.
So perfect. So going on that then, so what else is your career background? So you mentioned that internship, that's how you got started. So starting there, how did you get to the Stockton Heat? What other jobs have you held in between?
So at ESPN, things kind of evolved. I'll start off with them because they were the first people to bring me on, and then I was with the Checkers after that. ESPN, it was highlight logging for studio production. So I basically had 3 monitors in front of me, the game, highlight capturing software, and then another computer if I wanted to have stats or rosters just so I knew who to type in and whatnot for any given sport: basketball, baseball, college hockey, football, women's basketball, volleyball, pretty much anything that they asked of you based on the time. When I first jumped in, it was February of 11, so it was gearing up for the conference tournaments and then March Madness, so it was baptism by fire for me in that respect. Then that turned into National Signing Day, where I did that for 2 years, Signing Day 2012, Signing Day 2013 for college football, and contributing to ESPN News 24-hour coverage of it. And then it turned into tape edit operation in studio production. So they would have me in the tape edit room. I would record items for studio show use. So if South Carolina and Arkansas were playing in baseball and they wanted to interview the head coach Ray Tanner at the time, they would tape that. I would be on the recording apparatus. I'd hit record, have the interview, and then when it would come up on the studio show, they'd go, okay, cue rack 214 and play 214, and then that was what went out over the air. It looked live, but it was all pre-taped. And then cut-ins for that same game. So if we wanted to see what Baylor and Oklahoma were doing in Big 12 baseball, I would have that on another rack, tape a home run or something like that, especially if they radioed back in and said, hey, Binetti, get on 217 and rack back to that home run from whoever. Then when we'd come back in from break, hey, before we kick you back to South Carolina and Arkansas, Baylor, what a moonshot there to give them a 1-0 lead over Oklahoma or something like that. And so that's where that came from. Then it was the internship with the Checkers, where it was intermissions, then pregame and postgame. And then that turned into a job as the voice of the Rapid City Rush, starting off in the Central Hockey League and then dovetailing into the ECHL. Perfect.
And then from there, you went to the Stockton Heat?
Yep. From there, I went to Stockton.
Perfect. Well, thanks for sharing some of that background information on you. For those listening on KWDC, we're going to jump into our PSA break. So for those listening, we'll be back in a minute.
Here comes Peterson with it now. Peterson, open area to the captain. Here comes Fraze, looking for his 100th career AHL goal. Blue line, Walensky, a shot knocked away, rebound, he scores! He did it right on cue! The captain, number 100 in his American Hockey League career. And with 8:16 left in the first, the Heat strike first and take a 1-0 lead.
All right, everybody, my name is Luke Martin, and thanks for tuning back in here on KWDC 93.5 LPFN, and for those watching on YouTube or wherever you're hearing this from. My name is Luke. I'm here with Mark Binetti, voice of the Stockton Heat today. We're jumping back in from the PSA break, and so we were talking a little bit about your career background. So could you finish telling us what got you to the Stockton Heat?
Yeah, so like I said, we talked about on the hockey side specifically, it was the Rapid City Rush and the ECHL. And while I was in Rapid City, South Dakota, which if you don't know where that is, it's on the west side of the state, bordering Wyoming. and it's 30 minutes south of Mount Rushmore. So we've got a national monument right there. The Crazy Horse Memorial's there. The Badlands. There's the Black Hills are absolutely gorgeous. It's a hiker's paradise out there. I was like I said, I was with Rapid City Rush, and then I also did American Legion baseball with Rapid City Post 22 Hard Hats. Which, when it comes to American Legion baseball, they're like the New York Yankees of the state. 43 state championships. I think at one point they'd won 17 in a row from the 70s to the 80s, and I was blessed to watch 3 out of 4 championships in my 4 years with them. So that was a lot of fun, changing gears to a different sport, calling another sport that I absolutely grew up loving and listening to with the Yankees. And then that brought me out here after 8 years.
So as you said, hockey, that's a tough sport to call. It's so fast-paced. A lot of foreign names in there, too. How do you go about calling hockey such a fast-paced sport? How do you keep up with that?
Well, in order to keep up, you have to be prepared. Benjamin Franklin once said, by failing to prepare, you prepare to fail. So if you don't know what you're talking about, who you're talking about, or what they could be doing at any given moment, you're dead before you even drop the puck for the first period. When it comes to the foreign names, this is a tough one because Hooked on Phonics doesn't necessarily exist in Europe, and they have different phonetical pronunciations for things. You have to rely on the opposing team's broadcaster or media relations content, who you would like to think would know that pronunciation, and sometimes even they don't. Whether they care about it or not is irrelevant. But you do your best to follow that, or if they've played at a high enough level that you can pick a highlight from and hear their name, then you would go off of that too. And then it's just hammering it into your head. So I'm looking at, we'll get into the intricacies of this nice piece of equipment I have in front of me, but if I'm looking at number 10 on Ontario, Kim Nosiainen's from Kuopio, Finland. So you look at his name and you see how it's spelled, and it's a little different, but you just don't know. So you got to listen to some highlights. There's another one on here. One of my favorite ones in the league, Marty Firk of Ontario, who literally has a name that has 3 consonants in it. So how the heck do you say that?
FRK, yeah, exactly.
FRK, right. So, but then you get the French people in the sport, like for the Stockton Heat, Jacob Pelletier, whose name ends in IER, and it's not Pelletier, it's Pelletier. He's Quebecer. It's one of those things. And then even Johannes Kinnvall on our team from Sweden. Apparently, K in Sweden is a sh sound, so it's not Kinnvall, it's Kinnvall. So there's different intricacies you pick up with over the years. But I got to tell you, there are some tough names out there, especially the French ones. I remember the Wichita Thunder had a defenseman, Marc-Olivier Crevier-Morin. That sounds like a law firm, not a defenseman. The Norfolk Admirals at one point had Pierre-Luc Letourneau-Leblond. There's just all these different names out there. It gets pretty tough.
Oh, I bet.
And then not only studying their pronunciations, but also studying where they're from, what they're all about, what they've brought to the game of hockey or have the potential to bring to the game, and then just different things about the teams themselves in general.
Yeah, because, a lot of major broadcasts, they have 2 people talking a lot, and you're by yourself on the Heat, right? Correct?
Yep, I am.
So you don't have someone to bounce off of or fill off of or look at some ideas coming up. That's all you right there. So how do you find those stats, find those intricacies to the players, like you mentioned? How do you find those so quickly?
So for our players, it's a little easier because over time you're with them so much, you get to know them as people, and I think that's something that needs to be stressed. Yeah, we're watching guys with a godlike athletic ability to skate 35 miles an hour on a piece of metal 1/8 of an inch thick, but there's a person doing that, right? So in that instance, it's, you get to know the person who brings this athletic talent to the forefront and in a spotlight. So just knowing where these guys are from and what they're about, what their lives entail, and knowing their story makes it so much easier to talk about them. When it comes to the opposing team, it's your general statistical research that you do, but if it's somebody that you've crossed paths with, which, let's be honest, hockey's a very small world for as expansive as it is, you're going to run into people more times than not. So getting to know them on that level to then bring that up at a later time as well. I can't tell you how over this last year there are so many players that I have either personally worked with that are on the opposing team, or I've seen at the ECHL level that got called up to the American League this year, that it's just like riding a bike and you know what you need to know about them, and from having seen them play previously. So just on that note, getting to know the person itself behind the numbers is just as much of a part of that battle.
So what does your pregame routine look like, or a game day? So you have to find all this information about players. Do you study up, or what does that look like for you?
So it's a week-long process, or it's a multi-day process, I should say, because this week, for example, we're playing Tucson on Wednesday. We're playing Abbotsford on Friday. So I've got to concurrently prepare 2 rosters that I'm not going to see in back-to-back days, and I'm not going to see more than once this week. So it's a little different in that respect. But generally, if you gear up for a Friday-Saturday series against the same team, you've got the entire week to build up and memorize their numbers and memorize some of their statistics and get to know their background, where they were drafted, and things along those lines. And that's where this cutting-edge technology comes in, my spot board that I put together for every single game. This looks nice and organized and portioned out right. I used to handwrite these back in the day. That's why my grip strength on my right hand when I shake somebody's hand is so strong, because I had to painstakingly, in the smallest type possible, write down all these different notes. And it was quite something. But that's just always what my process was. And
now, is that personalized for you as a broadcaster, or is that like a general format?
So this is personalized to me, and a lot of that preparation is up to the person in question. There are some people that do half of this and feel just as prepared as I would on a broadcast. There are other people that do 20 times as much as this and get really intricate with it, and they feel just as prepared as I normally am putting this together. So, and everybody has their own rhyme or reason to it. Mine has enough information that I can fill in with certain situations in a game or other things of that nature, and just kind of play off of that. So we'll show a close-up here in a little bit, but when it comes to breaking this down, I'll have the team in question, their record, points, and points percentage, because that's something that's dealt with seeding and regular season championships in this league. Power play percentage and rank, penalty kill percentage and rank, and then where they stand in the division and either in the conference, or in our case, the Heat are number 1 in the American Hockey League. I'll just signify their league ranking if it's within the top 5. When it comes to players, it's number, name, last name capitalized, position in parentheses, and years experience in the box on the end. The line below that's their vitals, height, weight, where they're from, where they played college or junior, and if applicable, where they were drafted, what year and what position. If they are on the leadership side of things and have worn a letter at some point in the year, that'll be signified with an A or a C in a circle for the captain or alternate captain. And then season statistics, games played, goals, assists, points, plus minus, penalty minutes, power play goals, power play assists, shorthanded goals, overtime winners, and shootout splits. And then in the middle, it's their biography. In the instance, I'm just looking at him because he's at the top of the list. Greg Morrow played with the Kansas City Mavericks earlier this year, the ECHL affiliate of the Heat. So what did he do in Kansas City this year? Last year, what did he do in Stockton, also with Kansas City? What was his college career like? Did he have any accolades? And in this case, in 2019, he won his conference championship with Clarkson. And then he played in the Saskatchewan Junior League with the Humboldt Broncos. So we all know the tragedy Humboldt suffered 4 years ago. So, that's something you can bring up, that he was a part of the team that didn't necessarily go through that, but he, was, an alumnus of that program. So that's something you can bring up there. And then it just goes down the line for everybody else. On the right side, it's team statistics. So what's our current streak? What's our record in the past 10 games, home and away splits, overtime and shootout records, where our offense and defense ranks based on goals scored and goals allowed. And then power play goal totals, shorthanded goal totals, for and against, and then situational statistics like what's our team lead after, or what's our team record after they lead one period of play, or one of my favorite ones, what's the record when they lead after 2, in which case the Heat are 29-1-3, which is just absurd.
And now, do you do a lot of that research yourself, or do you have other statisticians who provide you that sort of information?
I do it all for me.
You do it all yourself. Wow.
Yeah, and it's compiled through like league technology and whatnot, so it's not like I have to go tooth and nail to find it. You just have to know where to go, and things like that. Another one that I like is what's the team record when they score the first goal in the game, which at this point, this was from heading into the game on April 8th, in 34 instances of scoring the first goal, they're 28-3-3. So, just things to back up certain storylines. Then it's team leaders in goals, assists, rookie scoring, defenseman scoring, the goaltenders, because there's 2 of them on an active roster. I put them down here, and then what I need to know about our team staff hockey operations-wise.
Perfect. So, that's a lot of information on paper. I'm sure, you have the meat and potatoes right there. How do you translate, calling a game, stats like that, how do you translate that into an interesting, vocal format on the broadcast? Doc Emmerich, he has his, waffle boarded, stuff like that, makes the broadcast interesting. So how do you translate stats play-by-play into that?
I think it's keeping it simple, right? And everybody's simple is relative. For Doc, he's a very intelligent man. And you'll hear in previous interviews that he's done with people on HBO or Sports Illustrated or NBC even, that the reason he utilizes so many different words and synonyms is because both of his parents were teachers. They were educators. So as he put it in his own words, the English language was respected in his house. So he knows it frontward, backward, the whole 9 yards. And for him, it keeps things different. It's not just constantly saying he shoots, he passes, he, saves it. It's, well, why is it waffle boarded? Because back in the day, a blocker was a waffle board of padding. So that's why it's waffle boarded or sticked away or gloved or trapped or kicked, squibbed, caddy cornered, cattywampus, all these different words that explain a similar trajectory, but it's not the same old usage of the words, right? And so I try to do something similar to that. I'm never going to have the lexicon that Doc Emmerich does unless I memorize a thesaurus back and front. But, I'd like to say angled along, advanced, forwarded, defers, drops off, something along that nature that, you try to keep, because you have to realize, Luke, when we're on radio, we are the people's eyes and ears. We have to tell them everything that's happening, give them as much detail, location, who has it, where on the ice are they breaking a plane. On television, I don't want to say it's easier, but it's simpler in the sense that people already see what's on the camera itself. You just have to provide a caption for what they already saw. On radio, you have to give them everything. You are their eyes and ears. So that's where a lot of that creativity has to come into play, and everybody's creativity is different. The biggest thing I'll hammer on is clock and score and location. Far side, near side. I tend to go more on that than left wing, right wing, because that changes up the ice with possession. So just near side boards to me, far side boards, far corner, near side this. And then attacking, defending blue lines, attacking, defending zones. I call them thirds because it's defensive third, neutral third, attacking third, so different ways of explaining that.
So does that lexicon, those words that you've built up, is that something you build up over your career, or how do you go about finding those words for yourself?
It's a bit of both. Sometimes it's genuine inspiration. More often than not, it's listening and watching other broadcasters and saying, "Hey, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna do that too." You got to realize, all of us broadcasters here in the United States and Canada, we're using the English language. You don't reinvent the wheel with that. The words are what the words are. Sometimes meanings change over time, but kicked means kicked, and knifed means knifed. All these different things to describe the trajectory of the puck or the motion of trying to advance the puck or play it. So, you're using the exact same language that John Buccigross or Doc Emmerich or Kenny Albert or Sam Rosen are using. It's just a matter of using it for how you feel comfortable to use.
Perfect. Well, thanks for sharing some of your technical aspect and your preparation that goes into broadcasting. We're going to jump into another PSA break here for those listening on KWDC 93.5. For those on YouTube, we'll be back in a minute.
Gravel, the patience of a saint, finally likes what he sees. Up ahead, finds DeSimone. DeSimone, cross ice through the neutral zone, settled on a hop by Godin. Godin there, looking back door to Philp. He scores! What a pass by Glenn Godin, back door to Luke Philp. And with 6:32 left in the first, the Heat are on top for the first time. It's 2-1.
Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Martin, and thanks for listening again here on KWDC 93.5, YouTube, or wherever you're watching from, to this interview with Mark Binetti, voice of the Stockton Heat. Thanks for being here again today. And before we jump back into the action, I'd like to ask, you mentioned earlier, studying up on players' names. What would you say the hardest player name that you've had to pronounce would be?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I've got to go back. Oh, man. There's been a lot, Luke. And I've been meaning to do this too. I keep talking about it, and procrastination keeps setting in on how many different players I've worked with that have come through my team's locker rooms. I've never had a problem with our own players. I'll tell you that. And I'm very thankful for that. But the other team,
is there a specific nationality that you'd say, these names are always hard to...
Well, sometimes the Russian ones can get a little wonky, and the Czech and Slovak names too, because their phonetics are so different. And a lot of the names by now have been very Americanized, that you want to stick to the authenticity of their name, but it's a little difficult. Actually, a prime example of this, now that I'm looking down at our lineup cards that I brought for examples, Heat goaltender Adam Vanner. Now, you look at his name, and it's spelled Werner. So any American's like, oh, that's Adam Werner, but that's not it. He's Swedish, right? So it's a little different on that front. You look at his background and whatnot, and so I asked him at the start of the year. This is actually a great tip for young broadcasters here. I asked him at the start of the year, okay, you played for the Colorado Avalanche last year. I've heard Werner and I've heard Werner. Which one is it? And he gave me the best answer possible, and he said, those are both incorrect. And I was like, what the heck are we doing here? And I said, okay, how do you say your name? And he's like, well, you can say either one of those two. That's fine. Which I immediately pull a complete pause, and I go, no, we're getting this right. So then I pull a Doc Emmerich trick, and I said, okay, Adam, how does your mother say your name? And he's like, well, it's really Vanner. So it's not Vanner, but it's not Vaughner. It's like right in between that, and you've got to try and say that while he's making a point-blank series of 5 saves in a row, and you just got to let your reflex take over. So that has actually been a tough one. And another one, too, Marty Pospisil, number 24. In Slovak, his name is actually Pospisil. The S in Slovak, or what I think that Cyrillic is the type, the type font that they use, whatever that language or type they use over there, it's got like a weird symbol on the S that it's a sh all of a sudden. And I remember hearing Kenny Albert call his brother's name in the Olympics. Christian Pospisil just won a bronze medal with the Slovakia national team, and he kept saying Pospisil. And I was like, that's not right. Pospy says his name is Pospisil. And so I went up to Pospy afterward, and I said, I had an interview with them talking about his brother's bronze medal. And I said, hey, help me out. Is it Pospisil or Pospisil? And he's like, well, technically it's Pospisil, but you can say Pospisil. And I'm like, what? No, you told us Pospisil at the start of the year. What are you doing? But so sometimes it changes over time. But at the same time, though, it goes back to you've got to use what you're given. And so from the opposing team, it's a phonetical key, and then they'll tell you, too. Like I said, again, Nosiainen for Ontario, it looks like Nusiainen or whatever, but it's Nosiainen. It's Swedish. It's Finnish. It's a little different. Yeah, that gets really tough, especially when you hear it one way, and then they tell you, oh, everybody's wrong, but it's whatever at this point. So you just kind of deal with what you're given, I guess.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that tidbit of information. So back to your scorecards and whatnot. Yep. So you said you were mentioning that you keep live stats of the game. So how does that help you as a broadcaster? Keeping up with the game as it's going on.
A ton, because it's reinforcement. Everything that I do preparation wise, and I'll show you this because, and I will say this too, when it comes to the preparation, it's evolved over the course of my career. Again, I'm going into the end of my 9th year. I've called 647 games coming into Wednesday night's matchup against Tucson, and not one game is similar to the next, especially with what you're talking about, what you're preparing on, and the methods of preparation expand. So I can even show you pictures of my old spotter boards that didn't have near the detail that these ones did, and the process that took forever on that. So over time, I think it was about my 4th year, I started actually scoring the games myself, so it helps because it's more reinforcement. So in the moment, you call that Matthew Phillips scores a power play goal at 7:12 of the first period, but what if you forget the time signature and the internet's not working for you with the electronic game sheet? You've got to have a backup. The best way to do it is take it down yourself. Now, sometimes the goals and assists will change based on if it was deflected, a bang-bang play or whatnot, if there was deemed possession between players, all that, but at least you've got a reference. So I can look down and say, in the middle of the second period, Heat have a 2-0 lead. The most recent goal, a 2-1 lead. The most recent goal scored by Emilio Peterson at 9:31 of the second period. His 10th of the year on the assist from Kevin Gravel and Nick DeSimone. Especially if I have a break in the action with as fast as hockey moves, that I can say that. If, Shinval has the puck behind the net, he's got a control breakout and he's just waiting. I can drop that in there.
Because their stats, they update live in the game.
Of course.
So like their year stats, they're going up during the game. So you got to keep up with that, obviously.
Exactly. And I'll do that with goals and assists and time of the score, what kind of goal, power play, 4-on-4, 5-on-3 power play. And then I'll do that with penalties too. So I can look at my game sheet, and if the Heat are on their most important power play of the game, when it's 2-2 late in the third, I can say the Heat to their 4th power play of the matchup because Christian Wolanin was guilty of tripping at 6:55 of the final period. And then the goalie stats and all these other things too, I can look back on because I save all of this. I can look back on at any moment and go, oh yeah, Dustin Wolf got the win. He stopped 2 of 26 shots. And then that's it. I can see what the line combinations were because I have those written down. And this is something else that's evolved from that preparation too, is an actual line chart. When I get the lines in the morning from the opposing broadcaster and from our coaches and from our senior director of communications, I'll have what their stats are because it's more reinforcement. But then if you notice on the bottom line here, we're playing against Ontario, so our season stats are in red. Our head-to-head stats against Ontario are in blue. So I can look at any moment and go, Matthew Phillips leads the Heat head-to-head against the Reign. In 6 games, he has 3 goals, 4 assists, and 7 points. And I can go down the line with that with everybody, and especially Dustin Wolf, the goalie. He's in 41 games at this point, 31, 6, and 3, but against Ontario, in 5 games, he's 4 and 1. And depending on how many close calls he's had or anything major that's happened head-to-head against Ontario, I can have another note that the last time Wolf started against the Reign was January 29th at home, and he stopped 2 of 40 shots on net, whatever the case may be, if I can't immediately recall it, which I'd like to think I could more often than not.
So obviously, you talked about head-to-head stats. The opposing team. As a broadcaster for the Heat, obviously you want to favor the Heat. How does it work? With favoring, but also remaining pretty neutral in your calling.
I mean, I think favoring is an unfair term in some capacities. Yes, I work for the Heat. Yes, I would love the Heat to win all 68 games we have, but there's a difference between promoting the home side and being a cheerleader. That's something very important for young broadcasters listening to this to learn, that you can't be a cheerleader, but it's okay to let people know you work for a team, right? But at the same time, Luke, when you watch sport, when you watch hockey in particular, there are 2 teams that play the game. There's not just one. There's not just your team playing the game. There's another set of 20 individuals on the opposite bench that are just playing the same game that your team is too. So, and they have just as much of a story that your team does. What's so much fun about Ontario and Stockton, every single time they've met up, they've been number 1, number 2 in the Pacific Division, regardless of who's held that rank. So there's a huge storyline there that you need to know just as much of Ontario as you do your own guys. But at the same time, you call the game as it is. And if the Heat aren't playing well, it's okay to say, hey, it's a tough go for the Heat. And if Ontario's playing that well of a game, then out of a sign of respect, you tip your cap to those guys and you let the fans know, hey, the Reign brought their A game today. That's why the Heat are down 3-0 with 5 minutes left. Or Heat are up, Heat are down 3-0 or whatever the case may be. So it's you just have to understand that every game's a story. And there's 2 sides to every story. There's your team, there's their team. And you have to recognize that both. There are some broadcasters who will not even recognize the opposite team, and that's a pet peeve of mine, because what if there's a young, bright talent on the other team that you want to know about, or that you feel you should know about, or if this has been such a tight rivalry, why? Who has made it tight? You look at a guy like TJ Tynan, who, coming into this game against the Heat that I had on April 8th, was leading the AHL in 72 assists. He's the leading scorer, tied with Andrew Podorowski with 85 points to his credit. That seems kind of important. The fans should know.
Yeah, exactly.
That if number 17 on Ontario's got the puck, something's happening, right? So that's something there that I try to impress to young broadcasters. Know as much as you can about both sides of the coin.
Yeah, because obviously in different sections of media, like, working in video media and marketing, you want to make your team look as good as you can.
Of course.
So you're not going to show, goals against. You want to show the highlights of your team. But obviously as a broadcaster, there's more of a, like you said, showcasing both teams, and, both teams have immense talent on them. So yeah, it's your job to, fairly, but also, support the Heat in what you say.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, our base root of our job is to call the game. People don't want to hear opinion. They don't want to hear rhetoric. They want to hear the game. So just call it. If there was a steal in the neutral zone, say it was a steal in the neutral zone. If there was a bad hit, you can, within reason, say it was a bad or dirty play. I mean, maybe not necessarily use dirty, but you can say it was a ill-advised play or something along those lines. Find a way to not completely sewer somebody or whatever the case may be. Just call the game. It's the biggest thing.
Because what was it recently? Arizona with Troy Terry and the broadcasters. It's tough like that. You gotta say what's happening, but you also can't just slander people out there like that.
Right.
So obviously it must be tough to do sometimes. But so going a little bit more into what you do on broadcast, do you have any advice for like young broadcasters in preparation, or how do you prepare your voice for engaging in those emotional calls of the game?
I joke with people that I do arpeggios. I have a music background, so I joke with them that I'll do, major triads or whatnot. But honestly, one of the biggest things I've learned over the course of my career is to hydrate. There were times where in the ECHL, you'd call 3 games in 3 nights. Sometimes if you were Rapid City, you would be lucky enough to play 3 games, 3 nights, 3 different cities, and you'd have to bust to all 3 of them in the middle of the night. So it takes a toll on you. At one point, I think it was my 3rd year with the Rush, I was just curious. I was like, singers and bands, they do this exact same thing. They'll play 3 concerts in 4 nights in 3 different places and all that stuff. How do they stay sharp knowing that they have to sing while their ears are being blown out for 2.5-hour sets every night? And the biggest thing that they talk about is hydrating. And so I will pound water if I know it's going to be a massive week, just so that I'm still sharp. And then in between periods, I learned this from a buddy of mine that used to broadcast, actually still broadcast for the Idaho Steelheads in the ECHL, Colin Shuck, cough drops in between periods.
Really?
That's a huge help. Oh, yeah. I saw him with a Halls one time, a bag of Halls, and it was, December, flu's going around. It was like November of 19, I think. And I said, Shucky, are you sick or whatnot? And he's like, oh, no, I just pop these in between periods and I'm fine. And that's somebody who's actually a trained vocal musician. He was in musicals and stuff, and that was something he swore by. And I was like, what do you know? I'm just going to drop a Halls or whatnot and be totally fine. And it actually makes a big difference.
Really? So obviously you mentioned, being sick and taking care of your voice. So as a broadcaster, how does that work then? When you are sick, when you've had a lot of games in a row, your voice might be a little harsh. How do you take care of your voice and still make it presentable for broadcast?
Well, the biggest thing you have to understand is there are no understudies. For guys like us, especially at this level. The NHL, that's one thing. If, just because his name's fresh in my mind, if Sam Rosen is knocked out with, God forbid, I'll just throw it out because it's recent, COVID-19. If Sam Rosen can't call a game because he caught COVID, then Kenny Albert will step onto television. He's got somebody that can go up there, and then whoever is left in the void of radio, John Giannone will take that over, or vice versa. They'll find somebody to put somewhere to give you an understudy. In the AHL, in the ECHL, and where I started the Central Hockey League, you don't have an understudy. It's you. So tough luck. I've been blessed. I've only missed 1 game my entire career. It was earlier this year, and it was for COVID. Otherwise, I would say that I've called 648 straight games. Instead, I've called 647. But it's, you just have to battle through it sometimes. There are a lot of times, there was a road trip we had my 3rd year with the team. Wednesday in Evansville, Friday in Cincinnati, Saturday, Sunday in Fort Wayne. 4 games in 5 nights in 3 different cities, and I was dead. But you just power through it because you're the guy. That's the biggest thing there. One of the funnier instances, actually, I think it was that exact same trip, was the first time I ever met Doc Emmerich. And I was actually sick on that trip too. So I was about to call my 4th game in 5 nights in Fort Wayne, and I had to have had the bubonic plague or malaria. I don't know what the hell I had, but I was dead. And still somehow had to call the game and meet my idol, by the way, which was nice. But yeah, that was definitely nerve-wracking for sure.
Interesting. So any other tips as far as health and taking care of your voice, like to sleep, any of that stuff? Is that all, what else is important to taking care of your voice like that?
Well, it is rest too. You got to do as much as you can, but you also have to realize too here, Luke, we're in the minor leagues, so it's other duties as assigned. So yeah, I'm broadcasting games, but with the Heat, I'm also trying to work on community relations, specifically hockey development. And back with Rapid City, I was media relations. So you work with Brandon Weiss just as much as I do. In our Heat office, I was me and Brandon in Rapid City for 8 years.
Wow.
So I had to do our game notes. I quarterbacked our television newspaper appearances. I got guys set up for media day with our corporate staff. I was at every single community function as a handler for the players so that they had somebody they were comfortable with, but also because, as somebody that broadcasts on behalf of the team, you have to know these community people. You have to be involved and have some kind of a presence. Even though it's not about you, people are going to ask you things about the team that you have to be knowledgeable on. And whether it's a player, what promotions we have, ticket deals, you've got to have your hand in a lot of things. So yeah, it sucks when you at Monday morning at 7:30 get back from 4 games, 5 nights, 3 different cities, and you've been bussing all night. You're in the office at 8:30. You've got to go home, shower, pound 5 coffees, and then go in and seize the day, so to speak, and do all of that. So rest comes at a premium. So every time you can take an opportunity to rest, you take it. That's the biggest thing I could say.
Well, perfect. Thanks for sharing some of this, technical and vocal aspect of it and what you have to say. For those listening on KWDC, we're going to jump into another PSA break here, and on YouTube, we'll be right back in a couple minutes.
Di Giuseppe, far corner, finds a man, centering shot, knocked away by Chechelev. He clears out the rebound. Here come the Heat back the other way. Jacob Peltier, full steam ahead with Phillips. Peltier, Phillips, he scores! What a pass! What a transition! Matthew Phillips, the first 30-goal scorer in a season in Stockton Heat history. With 12:27 left in the second, we are square at 2.
Hello, everybody. I'm Luke Martin. Thanks for tuning back in here on KWDC 93.5. And for those listening on YouTube or wherever you're hearing from, I'm Luke Martin, and I'm here with Mark Binetti from the Stockton Heat. How are you doing during this broadcast or this podcast today?
I'm liking it. We're having fun. Let's keep the fun rolling.
So before we jump back into the meat and potatoes, do you have any fun funny stories that you'd like to share? Obviously, that you can share on this.
Sure. So as a matter of fact, one of my former broadcast partners was a head coach I just recently worked for with Rapid City, Daniel Tatro, and he was a riot on the air. We were really tight, really good friends. At the time he became my broadcast partner for the first time, he was injured. He was the captain of the Rush. He was injured. And a lot of times, those years not having a bona fide partner outside of our bus driver, former pro hockey ref Tim Atchison, I would use scratch players if this was something they were interested in. And there were a couple of people throughout the year in the locker room that say, hey, I want to give this thing a shot. And if they liked it, then I'd go back to them a couple of times. And if they didn't, then it was cool. But at least I had a partner and different guys along the way. So Tets, he sounded like Ernie from Sesame Street. So he'd come into the booth, Benner, let's have a good broadcast today, eh, bud? And, it was one of those things. So it made it even funnier. There was one moment where he's injured. He calls back-to-back games with me against his former team that he played for, the Allen Americans. We win the game with 22.3 seconds left in regulation. Winston Daychief, our captain, 5 holes of the goaltender. We're going bananas. We needed this win to solidify more positioning, getting back into the playoff race because we had a heck of a second half comeback in that season. And Chiefer, 5 holes the goaltender. I lose my mind. 22.3 seconds left. They dogpile him. The Rush have a 3-2 lead. And he jumps on the air. Wow, talk about pandemonium. And it was like we lost it. The next night, we're playing Allen again. Final matchup of the series, rubber match. Rush have a 2-0 lead. We go into the third period. The Rush are on the power play, and Jesse Schultz scores a minute and 1 second into the third period. And we had this thing called the Minute of Madness, where if the Rush had scored in the first minute of the third period, everybody in the building got a free sub from Subway. And he scores 1 minute, 1 second, and we missed it by that much, to quote Maxwell Smart. And I tried to tossed Tets a softball to talk about bad penalties leading to power play, Jesse Schultz doing Jesse Schultz things, and he completely blew right by it. And he's like, my goodness, we missed the Minute of Madness by a second. Can they put the clock back? I was looking forward to that sub. Heck, I would have gotten mine toasted. And we just lost it. And my mom texted me right afterward, is he talking about subs on there? Like, we're talking hockey. And I lost it. It was a lot of fun with some of the things some broadcast partners have said and some mistakes I've made, too, that haven't been the greatest alive, that have made the air that, you have to recover from.
Jumping in on that then, for young broadcasters out there, obviously you're not going to have a perfect streak of broadcasts.
Sure.
No one's perfect out there. What are some of the mistakes you've made, and how have you jumped back from those mistakes?
So, like you mentioned, the game happens very fast. Sometimes you misidentify a player, and it is what it is. You're going off of a knee-jerk reaction of a number that you see in a split second because you obviously can't see all of the ice in one moment. You're focused on the puck and some of the peripheral surrounding area. Sometimes you have grammatical slips, or I don't know what the official. It's not necessarily a Freudian slip, but something that you like mix up a letter with, which happened one time. The puck was coming through the neutral zone, and I tried to say he flips the puck, and instead I said he plips, the word I'm not allowed to say on this air, and caught myself immediately, and I was like, oh boy, that's not good. My biggest advice in a moment like that. And this is something I try to calm interns I've had over the years down with, is they're always afraid of saying something that they deem as stupid, to which I'll fire back. With those mistakes or with other miscues, I say stupid stuff every time I'm on the air. I still get a paycheck every 2 weeks. Now, obviously, don't go out of your way to make mistakes, but just know that they are going to happen. One of the congruencies, I don't know if you're musically inclined or whatnot, but one of the congruencies I make with broadcasting, especially hockey, is it's like you're sight reading music every night. Sometimes you know the music well enough that you're going to play it flawlessly, and you will have a good broadcast and make virtually no mistakes and miss, accents or 8th notes or 16th notes or whatever. But sometimes you're going to fumble some notes, and you'll play a sharp instead of a flat, or you play different things. And but you deal with it, and you understand that they're going to happen. And very similar to how coaches look at film to fix their mistakes, X's and O's, I listen to my broadcast to fix whether I should have said something better in tandem with video, too, to see if I'm accurately describing it, and I'll scrutinize that, too.
So as a general rule of thumb in hockey or broadcasting in general, do you try to move on from mistakes, or do you step back, correct them, and then move forward? Like, what's your go-to?
Depending on the mistake. If you misidentify a player and you have enough time to recover and say, my apologies, that was X player, not Y. Other times, if you're accidentally on the wrong side of the ice, if the play happened on the far side and I accidentally say near, you just breeze through it. You just go right through it. There are some mistakes where you really can't reset, if you will. But again, if you misidentify a player in a situation, it's okay to be like, oh, my bad, I meant this guy instead. And again, that'll happen sometimes, Luke, because not often will you have the number to look at. Now, there are certain things that you look at with identifying players. It's not just the number on their back. You've got the number on their sleeve, the broadcast number. But if you can't read that, you have to look for how long's their hair? Are they left or right shot? What kind of a stick do they have? How do they skate? The line chart that I have, this guy is actually really helpful because 9 times out of 10, if I see Connor Zary on the ice, he's got Walker Duehr on his right and Emilio Peterson on his left. So that's another reason why I started doing these, is to get those line combinations, not necessarily memorized, but over the game you familiarize yourself with what those combos are. So, but yeah, they're just small mistakes like that. They're going to happen. You just learn from them. You listen to the tape and you reset.
So mentally then, obviously, it shocks you. You make a mistake. How do you mentally jump forward and not let that hang up on that mistake that you made? Like, how mentally do you move on from that?
Very similar to if you're playing the game. If you make a mistake, you still have, like, let's say I make a mistake on identifying a player, I don't know, 4.5 minutes into the game. I still have 55.5 minutes of hockey to go. I can't let it linger on that. I've got to move forward. I have to keep pressing on and realize that I still have game to play. Like, yeah, I screwed up in the first period. I still have 2 periods to score or make up for my mistake if I'm a player. As a broadcaster, it's all right. Well, I have to really be bang on target for the last half of this first period and then move on to the second and third.
Awesome. So let's not stick too long on the harsh mistakes. Let's talk about some of the good things you've done. What are your biggest accomplishments as a broadcaster in sports? Like, what are you proud of? I'm
proud of how long I've stuck with it. That I think is the biggest thing, because this is a hard business to break into. And if for whatever reason, personal or employment related, you leave the business, it's very hard to get back into it. In a lot of instances too, it's a war of attrition. You work a lot of long hours. You don't necessarily get paid a lot at these levels, and your hope is to make it to the NHL, where your paycheck's a little better and you have less responsibility in the sense of you can fully focus on what you want to do, which is broadcast or being a good community partner, things like that. But so it's a war of attrition and really survival. You got to make it this far. And sometimes people will never get that call to the next level. Other people, it'll happen like that. I knew people that were in the ECHL for 1 year that went right to the American League. They've been there for 5+, and they're still going strong. I've known people that worked tirelessly in the American Hockey League, like a Joe O'Donnell, who was with the Houston Aeros, old Minnesota affiliate since 2008, went with the team to Iowa, and just this last year made it to the National Hockey League. So do the math. He was in the AHL at Baker's dozen 14 years almost. And guys that take that long to get up there. So that's one thing I'm really proud in. I've had a few recognitions over the years. I was Central Hockey League Rookie of the Year, Rising Star, my first year, which I was very appreciative of. There's a lot of learning done that year, and I was appreciative that my peers thought I stood out enough to warrant that award. Of course, I'm the only recipient of that award because that was the first year they introduced it, and then the league folded in October. So the first and only Central Hockey League Rookie of the Year. And then one of the more points of pride for me, the last 2 years I had in Rapid City, I was a finalist for Broadcaster of the Year in the ECHL. And that wasn't, these accolades are great for me, right? They're, I've got my name on them, but the beauty of the awards too, Luke, is that they had my team's name on them too. And that meant more to me than anything else, because I didn't think in the middle years I spent in Rapid City, that organization didn't have the greatest reputation. And we all worked tirelessly to bring it back to a relevance where we had pride in what we did. Even if we weren't winning games, we still did things the right way. And luckily for the team. Watching them from afar this year, it worked out like that, where they're in the playoffs again. They're doing great things on and off the ice, and it was a real point of pride for me that I was recognized as a finalist, but I had Rapid City Rush next to my name instead of just my name at the forefront.
Awesome. Congratulations on all those
Thanks.
things in your career so far. So as we're beginning to close up our show today, I wanted to ask, is there anything that we didn't touch on? And secondly, what advice do you have for young broadcasters entering this field?
The most important thing outside of the typical stick with it, rah kind of stuff is it's not about you, which is ironic because as broadcasters, we are the show. We're the ones on the air, right? But the game is not about us. Luke, when people want to listen to the Stockton Heat, they're not listening to the Stockton Heat because Mark Binetti's calling the action. They're listening to the Stockton Heat because they want to know what their favorite team's doing. I just happen to be the guy on the microphone telling them exactly what they're looking for. That's the biggest thing. There are so many kids that come out of these top-notch broadcast programs and top-notch schools and things like that, that the second they get out, they immediately think they're going to the NHL. That's not the case. You're going to grind a lot for a long time. On buses, in the minor leagues, different markets. There are a lot of people that have bounced back and forth because of toxic situations or teams folding, teams relocating, things like that. You're going to have to grind. You're going to have to work and find your way through all of that. But it's not about us. Bob Cole, legendary hockey broadcaster for Hockey Night in Canada, who retired about 2 years ago, had a video tribute done on him by Sportsnet in Canada, and it was a 5.5 tribute to all the great calls and players saying what Bob Cole meant to the game and to Hockey Night in Canada, such a legendary program. And he looked back on a past interview of himself as part of this thing, and his past self said, "You're there to enhance the game. Don't ever try to steal it from the players. They're the game." And that brings it full circle that yes, it's cool if we nail a goal call. It's great if we call an unreal nail-biter of a 2-1 overtime win in the playoffs or whatever, but it wasn't about us. It was about the guys on the ice and what they did. That's the most important thing. To summarize all of that, there's a quote from Jim Valvano, Jimmy V, don't give up, don't ever give up. That speech, that I don't even think that's the most important part of the speech. I think the most important part of that I try to tell young people in this business too is I remember where I came from. And I know where I am right now. How do you get from where you are to where you want to be? I think you have to have an enthusiasm for life. You have to have a dream and a goal, and you have to be willing to work for it. And that, to me, is the bedrock of what I've tried to do for my career, and I hope that I can pass that on to younger people to have an enthusiasm for life and what you do, have a dream that might be in the stratosphere, have a goal that might be a little easier to attain, but get ready to roll up your sleeves and work because there are no passengers in this business. And to be a good teammate too. That's the biggest thing. It's not just you that's pulling the train on this. You've got sales staff, corporate, guys you work with in tandem in the office, your affiliate. Be a good teammate and good things will come.
Well, perfect. That's about wrapping up the time we have for today. Thank you for everybody who tuned in today on the radio, YouTube, wherever you're listening from. I want to thank Mark for being here, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here. I'd also like to thank San Joaquin Delta College for providing the resources to be able to conduct this interview. And for more content that I've created, you can check out lm6productions.com or follow LM6 Productions on social media. Mark, where can we find any of your stuff that we may be able to see more of you?
So my personal website, markbinetti.com, has demo reels, resumes, things along those lines. If you're looking for a template to put together a professional website for your own use, I'd like to think it's a fairly decently organized one, so you can check that out. I'm on Twitter at Binetti, PXP, BINETTI, and I'm on Instagram as well at Just the Radio Guy. So you can find me over there, and then of course you can find a lot too on the Stockton Heat website.
And perfect. And mentioning Stockton Heat is going into the playoffs this year. And so you guys can check out the Stockton Heat. Come see our games. Do you have anything to say to that?
Just StocktonHeat.com to find all the news and things about the team. And then if you're looking more for playoff information, StocktonHeat.com/playoffs is your headquarters for everything you need to know about who we're playing and when, which we're still trying to figure out with 5 games left in the regular season. Ticket deposits that start at $50 per seat. You can go and check that out as well. And all the other information that you need to know for the playoffs.
Well, perfect. It's exciting. It's been exciting being an intern for the Stockton Heat. It's been exciting seeing Mark's work, working with him at the Stockton Heat. So thank you again for being here, and thank you, everybody, for listening.
He settles down below his own goal line. Airmailed up ahead to Jacob Pelletier. Pelletier accelerates through the neutral zone. The ward's off an oncoming Jared Anderson Dolan from his backside. Pelletier defers to Phillips. Phillips creeps in. High slot. Left for Mackey for the win. Knocked away. Rebound. They score! Connor Mackey. 24 seconds into overtime. The Heat come back. 3 unanswered goals and they win it 5-4. If you blinked, you missed it. The Heat come from down 2 goals